Good afternoon. We'll call this August 23rd meeting of the Fargo School Board to order. Welcome, everyone. No one is in the audience, so there was no one signed up to speak, so we will proceed. I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda with the addendum. John?
Is this where we can pull things out of the consent agenda?
Absolutely.
I'd like to pull out the item D, memo 18, please.
And that is?
The school district financial report.
Okay. And we will put that, is it all right with you if we put that before 6A, policy monitoring, if we just start with that on our business?
Yep, that's just fine. Thank you.
Okay. So are you making that motion then to approve it with that pulled?
So moved.
Okay. John, is there a second?
Second, I'll say.
Rebecca? It's been moved and seconded to approve the order of agenda with the exception of memo number 18, the financial report, moved to just prior to 6A, our first business item. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same. Motion carried. Staff reports, FEA report. Welcome back, David.
Hello, thank you. I have back to school night in a half hour, so I'll be heading out of here in about 15 minutes. Just wanted to stop in and say hi. Some of you haven't met yet, so I'd like to meet you eventually here soon. And a lot of people were talking about yesterday, so that's a good sign, and there's positive things that were happening and a good message from yesterday, and so it's the beginning starts of getting the talk going at least. So we're looking forward to working with you guys over the next few months here for a positive outcome in March, and looking for a positive school year. So.
Great, thank you very much. I've heard a lot of comments from teachers too, so I'm happy that you've heard some comments as well, and it was good to see such a great turnout. So thank you. And so for the new members, this is David Marquardt, and he is our rep, so I encourage you to meet with him whenever it's convenient for your schedules. I would entertain a motion to approve the items on the consent agenda with the exception of, whoop. Oh my gosh, this is the second time I've passed over a.
Well, if you pass over, it must be approved.
Whoops. Man, I'm just off, I'm a bubble off today. Now I would invite Dr. Schatz to report on the operational plan.
Thank you. As we have spoke about before, and as you reaffirmed our strategic plan, we bring to you tonight the operational plan, the first run of the operational plan for this upcoming school year. I'm not going to go through it in detail. You've been provided this before the meeting, and I'll just go to the summary and talk about some of the highlights that we have going on for this year. And if you remember, everything in the operational plan relates back to what we have in our strategic plan. So the first thing is planning for and conducting a special election to address local revenue. We know that is going to be a major portion of our work this year and efforts, and so I think that's going to be a big item for us with the amount of time and effort that'll go into that. Continued implementation of our district strategic plan. It's been reaffirmed, so overall you'll see pieces and parts throughout the operational plan, and particularly from the teaching and learning department. There's a big part of it in there that is from that department. So number 3, the recommendations, and I know, Jennifer, you have asked for this before, the recommendations from the District Advanced Ed Accreditation Report. These are the 2 recommendations that they made for us, and so Bob and his team will be looking at those. That is implanted within the operational plan. Number 4, this is something that we've talked about a little bit, but again, enhancing our student wellness facilitator, dropout prevention facilitator, and youth risk behavior interventionist programs by consolidating resources focusing on student mental health and drug alcohol abuse issues. We, if you remember in the strategic plan, condensed a couple of the goals, made it into one bigger goal, and this is the reorganization of that. So Bob, working with Patty Cummings in our special education department, who oversees these folks, will be working on that and getting that up and going this year. And then completion and relocation of our district's operations center. As Brock has reported before, the progress of that is moving along well. It's a little bit ahead of schedule. The weather's been great. But once that's completed, the movement of all the different things and the reorganization and all the efforts that'll have to go in with the operation maintenance group food service, and all the things that we have going on. And Brock's team will be working on that. And so we're very, well, we feel really good about the fact that by springtime into the summer, that'll be no problem. We'll get that all moved over. And, but there'll be a lot of things that have to go into that too. I also mentioned in here that in addition to the operational plan outlined in this document, the district will closely monitor and develop the development of the rules and regulations regarding the new federal law, Every Student Succeed Act, or ESSA. Dr. Gross is on the state committee for that. And so we're watching as that process continues to play out. And, you know, anytime during the year as that starts to play out, we'll see kind of what that means for us. And it might mean that we have some things that we have to do in preparation for whatever that new law is going to bring to us. In addition, we have a legislative year too. So we'll be very busy with all the things that go on with the legislature. So there will be plenty of things for us to keep us busy. And so that really is what our focus will be here this year. And if there's any questions that anybody has, we'd be more than happy to answer those for you.
Jennifer?
So I'm just curious, can I ask at this point, can you maybe elaborate a little bit on number 4, enhancing our student wellness facilitator, and talk about what sort of changes are being made there?
What we did was we looked at the resources that we currently had been putting forth in a variety of different areas. We had 2 social workers that were being contracted through Southeast Human Services, and they had been working with elementary programs for a long, long time. That needed to be refocused, and so there's 2 people there. We had the 2 facilitators that have been supported through the Imagine Thriving organization, working basically on mental health issues and helping our counselors as they identify students who might need help with those students and their families. And then we have Amy Riccio, who was working on student dropout. In particularly, what she was doing was working with students who were transitioning from the traditional high school to an alternative experience, Woodrow Wilson, whatever it might be. And so she's been doing that for the last 2 years too. And so we looked at those positions and we said that in order for us to be more effective and efficient, we're looking at a different model, and that is to have 2 people at the middle school, high school that are dedicated to the south end, the north end, and the middle, south CBE. And what they'll be doing is they'll be developing a plan to address mental health issues, alcohol, drug issues, working with students who are leaving the traditional setting, being that conduit, and they're going to be social workers. And so they'll work with school, high school, and middle school counselors. They'll work with administration. They'll work with staff. Some of them have been trained to be our trauma trainers for our trauma training that we have to do that the state requires. So we just thought, rather than having all these little pieces and parts, let's bring it all under one umbrella. Let's have 2 in each one of those areas. And so that gives us 6. I forgot to mention Mary Kruger. Mary's been our drug alcohol liaison for the last several years too. And she had primarily been addressing the issue that if a student is cited for an alcohol violation by law, that is reported to the school, then her job would be to meet with the student to make sure that things are okay and if there's assistance that's needed. A big part of what these folks will be doing is working with families to help them sort out the system, if you will, to get them help if they need help, to help them stay connected to school, to make sure that if you leave a traditional setting, is there somebody following that to make sure that they get to the next step. And we found that with Amy Riccio, that's really worked well. We found out with the other 2 mental health facilitators that we've had working with us that I think you know, we've had over 170 referrals, for example, in the last year that they've worked with through the elementary, middle school, and high school. So there's definitely a need. It's no additional dollars that are being put forth. It's just a restructuring of what we're doing. If you were to add up how much is that as a resource, it's over $400,000 that is dedicated towards that. And so I think it's a response to the opiate issue. It's a response to the mental health conversations that are going on. And I think it'll be well done. One other thing, too, that I'll just mention quickly is that we have a little bit of a pilot going on over at Jefferson, too. Rachel's been working with Brad Franklin, and we're looking at hiring a social worker with title dollars to help work with the same types of things with some of the students and families who need additional assistance, and they'll be working through that to see how that works. And so I'm pretty excited about that, too.
Thank you. David and then Dinah.
Thank
Dinah?
you, ladies always first now. My comment is directly related to this, so I just wanted to say as a board member for Imagine Thriving that we're, number one, really excited that number 4 is part of the key focus of the operational plan. And we've had some discussion at a recent meeting, and I think that the restructuring is totally positive for what our organization is trying to see in service in the schools, and the fact that we'll have dedicated individuals in each of the feeder systems who can monitor kids from hopefully ultimately elementary through high school if need be, and can identify kids and service kids earlier. The more that we get our own staff trained, we can't train our staff to be the all care of the problem, but what we can do is help them to recognize the kids who need those services, and then these individuals will be able to help with that. So I think that it's a really positive change, and I'd like to thank Dr. Schatz for that, as well as just as a board member. I think that this is a really important focus, something we have to do, and it just makes for a better environment for all of our kids. So thank you.
In my former life, I was very concerned with dropouts, and I wonder if it would be possible to schedule Miss Riccio sometime in the future for a board meeting so she could give us a more of an overview of her program and what she's seen as an effect.
We had Amy, I can't remember what board meeting that was, if it was this past year, or I think it was this past year at the beginning of the year, came in, did a report. We can certainly have her duplicate that because, I mean, we've got plenty of data here. And Patty did a really nice job of gathering up the number of referrals that we've had, K through 12, of students who've been referred to the 2 facilitators that we had, plus Amy. Amy can talk about, and I told you at the last meeting too, we're kind of looking at the dropout report. We used to just give you the raw numbers, you know, we said this many kids dropped out in this. I'm looking at how can we make that drill into that a little bit more and make that a little more robust. So I'm not quite sure when we'll have that, but we're going to look at that, and when we have it, we can bring it to. So we'll do that. It's just a matter of when. So.
Yeah, I don't see an urgency. It's just that we've got at least 3 board members that have never met her, and it's an extremely important program. I'm really, really pleased that we're involved in it.
Well, and I will just mention that, you know, one of the things that we're doing here is we're creating this, and so we still have to hire a couple people because we made a decision here in end of July to get this going. Once they're hired, that group of 6, working with Patty and Bob and the counselors and other folks in our district, will really be ferreting out exactly what they're doing and how they're doing it. But we have guidance from what we've already been doing. It's just a matter of restructuring that. So I'm confident that once we get into the fall here, we'll get organized, and I think it'll be very dynamic, and not too many people are doing this around here. So this is another one of those things that I feel that we're being leaders on, and a great response to our community with regard to when I get asked, what are you doing about all these things? Well, this is our effort here, one of many, but this is a big one. So it's a good thing.
Thank you. Anyone else? This is our chance to give input. It's the first reading, and we will see the final version back again. So anybody else have any thoughts they'd like to share? No? Well, thank you, Dr. Schatz, and we will see the final version
Next meeting, and that'll be where we ask you to approve it, and that'll go into action.
Thank you. And thank you for all the work that goes into it. It's always quite an experience to read this annual work plan, and then you get to the end of the year and realize that those boxes have, for the most part, been checked, and it's always ambitious. Now, I would entertain a motion to approve the items on the consent agenda with the exception of D, the school district financial report.
So moved.
Dinah?
Second.
And John? Motion by Dinah, seconded by John to approve the items on the consent agenda A, B, C, E, and F. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same. Motion carries. Thank you. So now we will look at the annual financial report. And John, what questions or comments did you have?
I didn't have any questions in particular, but I think some others did, and I just had a chance to pull it
Oh,
out.
okay, who would
So,
like to,
Anybody else that has questions?
Jennifer, go ahead.
He beat me to the punch there, so I do just have a couple questions. So I'm just curious, why under the student activities transportation is the amount 0? My assumption is that it's categorized somewhere else, but I just thought.
And Jennifer, could you tell us what page
Oh,
you're on and where you're at?
I am on page, well, now I wrote it in my notes, so let me see what page it was actually on. I think it's on page 12.
Brock, I'm guessing over to you.
Members of the board, Jennifer, as we submit the data into the report, we just don't break it out separately. We have our transportation, we have it in two places really, total transportation cost of the district or part of our activities budget as a total cost for activities. There's really not a uniform way that this gets reported to DPI, so we've always reported it as part of our overall activities costs. And in there, this became apparent. This is one of many areas that became apparent, if you recall, during the standard of effort when Dr. Schatz shared that when you look at the state finance facts, and we try to get the most accurate comparisons, districts report things in different areas, and so we're reporting our transportation in our overall transportation costs in the beginning of the report for activities.
Jim?
There's one other reason. We actually don't own buses as such. Many smaller school districts employ the bus drivers, own the buses, repair the buses. We instead have our transportation contract with Valley Bus. So that's why we don't have these individual breakdown lines.
So that kind of leads to a larger question, Brock. Since this is the format and the template that's required every year by DPI, how much, and I think those of us who are in nonprofits that have to do different versions of things, and it's always square pegs into round holes, how much adjusting and shifting and tweaking does it take to get the way our financial statements are laid out and what they ask for? Is it apples and chainsaws or not quite that bad?
Yeah, Madam President, members of the board, actually, that we are in our second year of making that much more seamless because if you recall, last year when we gave you our annual budget document, we tried to mirror this as much as possible. Prior to that, for those of you who've seen it prior to last year, we only reported general fund dollars. We did not report grant funds in our operating budget that you approve. And through various conversations, through planning and others, we decided let's try to mirror this document as much as possible. So there's actually a lot less of that. It's much more of an apples and apples when you will see our annual operating budget and this business manager's report, which is, I guess, mostly what we call it. So you'll see very little is the short answer, but 2 years ago, significantly, because we pulled out a whole section.
Thank you. Jennifer?
So then as a follow-up to what you just asked, is that the goal? Is that eventually we'll be moving to categorize activity transportation under activity transportation, or are we going to leave it lumped?
We haven't talked about specifically changing how we put it in. As we work with Jerry Coleman and DPI, we've not gotten any negative feedback in the manner in which we report, and we've been pretty consistent. We're not opposed to looking at it and talking about it, and certainly something that through planning we can probably discuss throughout the year. We haven't specifically talked about, other than when we now incorporated the federal funds into our general fund budget, how we categorize the other things we haven't specifically discussed.
So you're saying that there will always be some things that may suit other districts that don't align with ours because every school district is a little different and,
Yeah, and a lot of that is in how they report some of their different staffing or different services they provide. They might report them differently. And so, yeah, there's always a little bit of a difference, so it's not, the format will look consistent, but if you lay ours beside the various, the biggest 16 districts, it wouldn't be apples to apples even amongst them. And as Dr. Schatz shared with you in the standard of effort, even between us and Bismarck, who are very similar, there's differences in how things are reported and in what lines, just for various reasons. So there will always be a little bit of that.
okay. Go ahead, Jennifer.
I would just say I welcome the conversation to continue at planning. And then if I may ask a follow-up. So there was one other thing that I could use some clarification on. Why do we group, I think it was under salaries and benefits, we had 1 through 6, and then 7 and 8, and then high school for many of the categories, but it didn't mirror our buildings, K through 5. Kindergarten was separate, there was preschool, kindergarten, and then it was, let me see if I can find the page.
Do you want to take that one? No?
I have an assumption.
Yeah.
Huh?
Sorry. Okay.
Positional power. I think, what you got to remember, this is a DPI report. And you remember that DPI tries to shoot to the middle so that, because all the different school districts out there, right? You got these little tiny districts, large districts. And so a K-6 category would cover the grounds of all the elementary, even though many school districts have different configurations. Some have the K-6 school. We have the K-5. Okay, so that's, and there's, I don't even know, there's probably still some, I don't know, Bob, is there still 7, 8, 9 schools out there? I think there are. And those are the old junior high models. And now we're in a middle school model, which is the 6, 7, 8. And then you move the 9th graders to the high school, so you have the 9, 12. So that's my assumption as to why that report would be that way. They're just trying to, K-6, what do you have? And that's what you would try to report, so.
Sorry,
Dinah.
I can just add to that licensure in the state, which I never knew. I know more about licensure now than I think I want to know. But there's rules about that too, and what license you have and what grades you can teach, and they often group through 6 and 7 and 8 and so on. So I don't know if they're connected in terms of how they were arranged, but that would be a clear explanation for why this is the way it is. And the rules with licensure are even more complicated and varied, so I wouldn't get excited about it. I think that's just there.
Any other questions? Oh, Brock.
Madam President, members of the board, one other thing in regards to that, the funding formula itself, when you look at the worksheet, and this is to try to mirror everything that comes from the legislature and from the state, as you report your student membership in your ADM, you report it as 1, 6, 7, 8, 9, 12, kindergarten separate. And so I think they try as much as they can to have all the state information consistent, even though our configurations might be different.
I do have a question. The memo is dated as of today, but this report, I guess I assumed, but I should probably ask, is as of 30th of June this year, the end of the previous fiscal year?
That is correct. The report is typically due, I believe it's August 15th, and because of how we're scheduled, we get an extension from DPI through Jerry Coleman. All data is effective June 30, end of fiscal year.
Any other questions? David?
I have one, and I don't exactly know what we call, do we call it an interim principals, where we have people who are on leaves of absence to work as assistants or whatever?
Rachel can answer what we do with our elementaries, but right now we don't have anybody on leave of absence, so that wouldn't apply. But with regard to how we structure the assistance for elementary principals, I'll let Rachel tell you what that is.
Sure, there are elementary interns, administrative interns, and maybe what you're referring to with the leave of absence is we guarantee them a classroom position after their 2-year position as an intern is up, because they're on a teacher contract.
Yeah, that's exactly what I meant. I called them interim, but I meant the intern positions. Are they listed under their various levels as principal salaries or instructional salaries?
They would be included in our teacher contracts as instructors.
Anyone else? Okay, since this was not approved under the consent agenda, I would entertain a motion to approve the financial report.
So
John?
moved.
John,
Second.
second by Dinah, to approve the school district annual financial report and file it. Diana, if you would call the roll, please.
Rodenbiker,
Yes.
Ulrich,
Yes.
Ani,
Yes.
Benson,
Yes.
Goldenberg,
Yes.
Johnson,
Yes.
Knutson,
Yes.
Paulson,
Yes.
Boyd.
Yes, motion carries. Thank you very much, and thank you for the good questions and discussion. So we are continuing our business agenda, GP7 committee structure. This is the time of year when we look over our committees and we have an open discussion as to what people feel are the current committees we have, if we still feel that they are appropriate for addressing the work of this board, if there are any changes to the description, that sort of thing. So I think I will just throw it out there and say if anyone has, rather than going through each committee separately. Jennifer, you can get us started.
Thank you. Okay, so my question is, and maybe this has come up in discussion before, but I thought this was an appropriate time to ask again. On governance, we don't currently include the negotiations chair. I'm not really sure, obviously that's been decided some time ago. I don't really know the rationale behind it, but maybe now is the time to discuss whether or not we should change that.
Excellent question. I don't know the history of that, and frankly, I goofed because when I was laying out the list of committees, I just automatically included the negotiations chair and governance until it was pointed out to me that that was not, I goofed. Well, but I did. So I always turn to Jim at these points as our resident sage.
Yeah,
Keeper
well-
of the history.
Well, technically speaking, the negotiation committee does exist permanently, but it really only functions every other year, because we typically negotiate a 2-year contract. So theoretically, if for some reason there was a request to reopen negotiations, and there's a procedure for that, in the off year, then that's why we actually have an appointed negotiation committee at all times, even though we don't expect them to meet except for every other year. And that's why it was determined originally when we went to this model that, well, that's not really a real standing committee. It's more a task committee with a very specific assignment that comes every 2 years. So it was just decided at that point in time to not have them be on governance.
Respond. Couldn't we say the same thing about GAC?
Not necessarily, because GAC has more than just legislative work associated to it if you read through its purposes.
I was just thinking in the history of meetings, how many meetings did we have for GAC last year, really? 1, 2? That's what made me think of.
I think we had 6 that I went to.
I was there too, I guess maybe it just didn't feel like that many. So, anyway, I guess, at this point, I mean, I sort of feel like we should include negotiations chair, but I'm one of 9, so.
Well, the topic is open for discussion. Any other thoughts? Rebecca?
So I have a question. So on the so we have the contract negotiated for 2 years. And this year we have, David, you're the chair, right? Okay. So next year, so on the off year, we don't have someone assigned, right? Or Jim, what was
Actually,
that you-
it
I
still
didn't-
exists
I
as an
misunderstood what you
assignment,
said
but
then.
it's inactive.
So then would David be then on that off year?
That's
I
up
mean,
to
would
the
it be that
next-
same?
It's up to the next president. It's certainly within the president's purview to appoint a different committee, if that were the case.
So we had a committee last year.
I
We
mean, I
had some-
think sometimes you don't even have the same board members, so sometimes you do have to do some shuffling of appointments. But it always does exist as an appointment, it just doesn't meet.
So who was the chair then last year of negotiations?
I think Paul was. I was president, so see, that was where we had to shuffle it, because I had been chair of negotiations, but then the next year when I was president, then the only committee the president chairs is governance, so I'm pretty sure I appointed Paul to chair that, knowing it would be inactive because he had other appointments too. Dinah, oh, of course you can. Any other thoughts? Well, at this point, would you like to make a motion?
I suppose I could do that.
Why not?
I guess I would like to move that we add the negotiations chair to the governance committee.
Is there a second? Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Second by David. Any further discussion?
I have a question then. Would that be just on the years that we were actively negotiating? Or would it be every year?
You would get to go to 24 more meetings.
I think it would be, yeah, whoever is the chair, that would be on the off year as well. If the committee exists and if that is the stated membership of governance, then it would be the off years as well. Dinah?
So I'm just playing devil's advocate. It's possible, and it has happened in the past, that individuals chair more than one committee, or that the vice president is the chair of the negotiations committee. So are you saying we have to have 6 people on governance, or are you just wanting the negotiations person to be included? Do you follow my question? So I think we have to clarify which way if we're going to do that, whether that's.
Well, according to the motion as it's made, it would just specify that the chair of negotiations would be on governance. So depending on how the chairs play out, governance could have 5 or 6 members. I don't know that that makes a difference, but anyone else? Okay, we have a motion by Jennifer and a second by David to add the chair of negotiations to the governance committee. Is that accurate? Diana, if you would call roll, please.
Ulrich,
Yes.
Ani,
Yes.
Benson, yes, Goldenberg,
Yes.
Johnson,
No.
Knutson,
No.
Paulson,
Yes.
Rodenbiker,
Yes.
Boyd.
Yes, motion carries. Thank you. Anything else on committee structure? John?
I know this is talking about the standing committees. Attending meetings last year, or maybe it was the year before, there was maybe a healthcare committee or a health insurance committee. What, was that an ad hoc committee, and does that need to be addressed at this time?
Yeah, these are just the standing committees that come up under our policy review. What you're referring to, there are several committees that board members serve as liaisons to, and that's actually scheduled to come up in discussion with governance, because those bodies kind of come and go, and some, maybe the body or committee itself doesn't exist anymore. Maybe it's time to reevaluate our purpose, so that is scheduled to come up in governance in the next month or two. So that is something different. I guess I do have a request. We've been kind of talking about this outside of formal meetings for a while now, but our old friend, the Communications Committee, for many years, and a little history, it seemed to look for a purpose, because early on, when our professional staff was just not in the format that it is with such a professional communications division. It was a lot more, I think, board hands-on or directed or, and what also fell under that purview was trying to cook up some sort of student engagement event and so forth. I guess I would like to invite, since this is the time we're supposed to do it in the course of our year, Dinah and Rebecca, who've served as chair, and Jennifer, who's been appointed as chair. Do you have any thoughts to throw out there, or should we just proceed this year as is? I'd just like a little history discussion.
Well, I'll tell you that after being chair for 4 or 5 years in a row, I raised this a few years ago and it was shot down. But, I mean, this past year, there were quite a few things that, sort of came up. The communication audit mainly was the discussion as a result of the communication audit. But, I mean, my point was that we have an excellent communication team that doesn't need to be directed or reminded or need us to consult about the quality of the materials that are being produced. There was a time where, we really did play a role in that. I'm torn now between whether there needs to be a communication committee. I know that one of the, well, first of all, back up. We already have set in place our professional development liaison pieces to the schools as a par for all of us to do every year. So that's in place. We don't have to organize it anymore. It's part of our routine. But the one piece that's left under that umbrella is the more broad community-based communication or interaction. But we also have the state of the district that's going to happen. I believe it's November. And, things like that are, again, we've added into our calendar as routines. So I guess I would be open to, potentially dissolving a communications committee, although leaving room for a ad hoc committee that if an issue came up. I'm also happy to continue with the communications committee if folks feel that there's enough on the agenda to go forward with. So, and it's not because I don't want Jennifer to be chair or anything like that. It's
Well, and I think regardless, this would be.
I tried it. I tried this a few years ago when I was chair, and it just went.
I think regardless, this would be a transition year. This is not a, but, or direction, because as this is the one committee that has kind of sometimes struggled to find direction. I think if there's input for Jennifer, who's chairing this committee this year, this is the time to talk about it. And the only reason I brought it up is because any topic of conversation that comes up that much, when we have a place during the year that we're supposed to talk about it, I wanted to make sure that we at least had a chance to air all the thoughts and maybe have actually bring some clarity going forward. So, Rebecca.
I would keep the committee. I bet if it could be that that the needs of the committee evolve. So I don't know. I think that the committee did a lot of good work last year. Some of it had to do with digging into the nuts and the bolts of our policies and the wording even, and some set of people actually needs to do that kind of thing too. So I felt like there was a lot of good work, and I think that some of the recommendations in terms of board involvement, in terms of community, and even what we were doing yesterday at the back to school event, some of those things might not have been discussed had we not had a committee to review the audit and hammer through some of that. So I think that some of what the committee is charged with probably will change as the needs go. But with the mill levy vote too, I don't see why we would not use, there's expertise, there's professionally trained expertise in terms of individuals that are serving on that committee too, also with Christie. And so I think that we could possibly utilize those folks in regard to, further, hopefully assisting, not like micromanaging, as Dinah said, because we have staff. So we don't want to do the same thing and direct the staff. Or, although we can, because we're a committee that then goes to the board and the board can give direction. So that's partly our job. So I look forward to what that committee does this year.
Jim?
I'm just going to be real self-serving here. If we eliminate communications committee, I'd recommend we eliminate planning, because my fear is whatever normally would be sent to communications will then come to planning. And I'm not really looking to expand the laundry list there. I understand there are times that we haven't had any burning topics that needed a lot of focus from the communication committee, but they will certainly come up again in the future. And while we have at least landed on a plan for our role as liaison to the schools, I by no means think we've tried it, tested it, and decided it's in its final form. So I think the committee really needs to make sure we're doing our role, get the feedback, and then really evaluate going forward, was this the right way to do it? I'm not so sure the way we've taken the liaison role really does much for student engagement, to be honest, which is an area, again, I'm not saying we have to have that as an annual thing. I just think it'd be short-sighted to think we no longer have a need for this. And I get what Dinah was saying, we could always form an ad hoc committee. I would be of the mindset we just form the ad hoc committee because we'll plan on sending something to communications to work on. So I think we leave it in place. And, I'd also, although she's not here, I would think the communications committee is of value to Anne Marie as a sounding board. I mean, Brock uses planning as a sounding board, uses GAC, as Dr. Schatz does, as a sounding board. So I would think Anne Marie may have, from her perspective, some ways she sees communications committee being of value to her team too. But I don't want to speak for her.
Thank you. Well, and since Anne Marie will be certainly leading the effort to come up with materials as we head toward March, I would imagine that the committee would have a very important role to fill there. This is turning out to be affirmation, which I'm happy about. John?
I also think we need to keep it, if only because of the perception, the public perception, and our perception from all of our stakeholders it gives to them, that we care about transparency and being, that we're being heard and that our stakeholders are being heard by us as well.
As I said, I get shot down. No, I'm not in favor of cutting it out now, but I was much more in favor a few years ago for different reasons, but I'm quite happy to be shot down yet again.
Good, good. Well, I think we have a hearty consensus here, so that is great. I have one more question, and this one is for Jim. I'm just trying to, gather up all the things that have kind of filtered through over the years. At one point, there was a suggestion to rename planning and finance, just to be more transparent to our community, that's the committee that looks over financial things. Do you have any thoughts, or has that ever come up?
Yeah, I have thoughts. I would think just about anybody in our community that reached out would find out in short order if they had stuff related to the budget to, first of all, be directed to our business manager, Brock, but then also directed to planning. So to me, at one time it was actually called the Finance Committee, until we realized this committee was doing a lot more than just numbers and budgets, as it was looking at long-range facility planning and a number of other tasks that had been assigned to it. So I'm inclined to leave it as planning, but if for some reason first of all, I'll just go on record, I don't think the average citizen out there knows the names of our committees. nor do I think they care. Yeah, I'll just say it. So I'm perfectly fine having it called planning. I'm perfectly fine having it called whatever we dream up.
Okay. Anybody have any other thoughts about the committee list? I think you do? Go ahead.
I just think that as you monitor GP7, this entire conversation, the committee structure, I'm wondering if this wouldn't find its way more appropriately at a retreat or during a summer session. Here we are, school year is going to kick off, we're already ready to go. You've named your committees. Now we're talking about whether we should have committees, how we should have committees. It just seems awkward, and I wonder if this doesn't fall on the agenda at this time because it's always been that way. And so my suggestion to you would be maybe we want to consider moving this discussion to June or July, somewhere where
Sure.
if there were to be a change, then it could be enacted before the committees are put together as the president is looking at that. So other than that, how many committees you have and how much time you guys want to put in is up to you.
There you go. Well, that makes good sense to, we'll mention to Anne Marie to just change that on the calendar. But I think starting the year with an affirmation that all the committees are what we want and that they're doing the work we want is not a bad thing. Dinah, did you have something?
Sorry, I was just going to ask if you need a motion to change the date. So I was going to change the date of when we, or if you can just ask.
You can't, because there's a motion on the floor.
Oh, no, but I mean, we could deal with the other motion. It's just a question. Do we need to actually have a motion to do that, or that's not necessary?
I don't know that it's necessary to change when we,
I mean,
Communications' first assignment is to take a look at this and to
yeah.
go back and look at in your GPs, you have the monitoring and the dates of when you monitor. And so you could refer this to communications, since I opened up the Pandora's box here.
Yes. Okay.
And have that, should you have this discussion earlier before the committees are seated. And so I think that would be appropriate if you did that. I don't think you need a motion to make that happen. I think it's appointed to, like you do with other committees, this topic, so.
We do not have a motion on the floor at this time.
we voted already on, yeah,
Yeah.
on adding negotiations, but this does not, for approval, does not have a motion yet. So I would entertain a motion to reaffirm this, but also to add, go ahead, Dinah.
Okay, so now I'll move that we reaffirm the committee structure as written with the addition of the negotiations chair to. So I don't have, as written then, well, as amended then, because we amended it, right?
Yes.
Okay, there you go.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion with the note that we will ask communications to look at the evaluation calendar?
Point of order.
Yes.
Is this a motion or is this an amendment? I heard the word amendment in there. So I just want to make sure that it's reflected correctly because Anne Marie will ask that question.
Exactly why I thought we had a motion on the floor, because we had to have had a motion to amend it, which we did
Yes.
amend it, right? Either that, or we now have to have a motion that would add negotiations and put that all together. So either we amended a motion, and now we're back to that motion, hence I thought we had one, or we don't have anything yet.
I see. That was my, my error in asking for a motion to make that change, when actually that was amendment. That should have been an amendment to the overall, so. Can we strike that former action?
I would like to make a motion.
Thank you.
I'd like to move that we accept and reaffirm GP 7 with the addition of adding the negotiations chair to the membership of the governance committee in item 1B.
Second.
Motion by Jim and a second by Rebecca. And let me just ask, does this mean that technically the former action did not occur?
Sorta.
Sorta? So that will
I'm
not
just
show up?
correcting. 'Cause,
Thank you.
yeah.
Any other comments? Diana, would you call the roll, please?
Yes.
Benson? Yes. Goldenberg?
Yes.
Johnson?
Yes.
Knutson?
Yes.
Paulson?
Yes.
Rodenbiker?
Yes.
Ulrich?
Yes.
Boyd?
Yes, motion carries. And thank you again for helping untangle that. My apologies. Moves us to EL1 and EL2 that we can certainly consider together. I would entertain a motion to approve them, then we can ask if anyone has anything to add.
Motion to approve.
David, motion to approve
Second.
EL1 and 2, second by Dinah. Does anybody have any comments to add? That there were no comments, but in addition to your ranking, David?
Who comes up with this word, global executive restraint? What in the world? It's just, it sounds so odd.
Go ahead.
That would just be the terminology used at the time when you put this together, which would reflect when we had Dr. Flowers here talking about the whole policy governance model, because this is all part of that. And so it's just the language that is used. And so I could go back and do a Google search to figure out the history of who officially made that. But I don't know, David, so, yeah.
We're taking over the world. Any other questions? Diane, if you would call the roll, please.
Benson? Yes. Goldenberg?
Yes.
Johnson?
Yes.
Knutson?
Yes.
Paulson?
Yes.
Rodenbiker?
Yes.
Ulrich?
Yes.
Ani?
Yes.
Boyd?
Yes, motion carries. Thank you. This will probably be brief today because we're just getting going this year. But committee liaison and correspondence reports. Jim, if I could start with you.
First of all, planning, those of you that are on the committee or anybody else that has nothing else to do, we are going to be meeting on September 2nd, 7:30 in the morning in this room. I attended an SEEC board meeting about a week ago now. Really focused a lot of our attention on different changeover issues now that they have become their own legal entity, their own fiscal agent, with a lot of help, I might add, from our business department. And a lot of thanks go out to you and your team, Brock. We talked a fair amount about what's going to be the impact to the SEEC staffing and programming with the runoff of the Succeed 2020 grant, because it does not appear that that will be renewing. And then remarkably, we had a long discussion about how that executive team at SEEC is going to report on the strategic plan to the board. And they thought maybe having an 88-page report would be an ideal way to do it. I suggested maybe that they keep their 88-page report and create a dashboard that really gives us the 10,000-foot overview, and I think that's what they're actually going to be doing. Also attended a National School Board Leadership Conference last week in Chicago. Had the fortunate opportunity of meeting somebody some of you may know already. I never knew her. I think her name was Lydia on Sesame Street. She was a Latin woman, one of the very first Latin women portrayed on any kind of television, I guess. Fascinating woman. The leadership conference, its real purpose is to actually go through the nomination process for all the different area directors and board members, and the nominating committee members and the resolution committee members. But they also throw in a lot of, I guess for lack of other ideas, I think the same kind of thing we see at the national conference itself. Had speakers on really identifying the new achievement gaps. You know, the historical achievement gap has been inner-city urban versus primarily black inner-city urban, compared to, I guess, Fargo, North Dakota, and the rest of the non-urban areas. But remarkably, they had a statistician in that really was looking at what really is the demographics of this year's coming kindergartners versus this year's graduating seniors. Some pretty dramatic things in just that short 13-year time frame. It is estimated that 49% of the kindergartners that attend school this fall will come from a single-parent household. 19% of the graduating seniors will be from a single-parent household. Although, put an asterisk by that, because about 80% of the dropouts that would have graduated had they not dropped out are also from single-parent households. And I just had a hard time putting my hands around this number, and I think I'm right on it, but I didn't bring my notes. Approximately 9% of enrolling kindergartners have one or more parents incarcerated currently. So the world is changing pretty rapidly, not just in terms of ethnicity, but in terms of the family structure, regardless of the ethnic background of the family household. And they talked a lot about how are we going to address that? How are we going to actually see this unfold over the next 15 years? And what resources is it going to take to address those achievement gaps? We had a financial update. National's in a little better shape. Not really good shape, but a little better shape than they were a year ago, but still have some major financial hurdles in front of them. And there was a fascinating presentation that I'm going to have to track down this gentleman. He was a classroom teacher turned administrator, went to get his doctoral degree, and he has really focused his attention on taking what he calls social media, which is much different than just Facebook, and interfacing it into classroom instruction. And I'm going to try and track him down and get him over to Bob and Rachel, because just the numbers based upon the new building he got assigned to, which had like a 70% free and reduced lunch population for the district, has done dramatic things by, first and foremost, decriminalizing Twitter. That was his first act as the technology administrator for that district. So he's talking about how kids are learning, but even more so how teachers are doing under the cover professional development outside of the district through technology and interfacing with teachers globally. So I found it pretty fascinating. I think you'll look at it and actually understand what he was talking about. So I'll try to get that to you. And that's it.
Thank you. Wow. Rebecca?
Let's see. Today I was at the North High luncheon that they have. I know Dr. Schatz, you were there. Brandy, you were there also. So visited with some retirees. I knew some of them, so not because I went to school there, but just through other things in town. So that was fun. It's nice to see that it sounds like a good group of retirees keeps coming back, and they have a great time chit-chatting, and they have a picture taken and all that. And I just kind of went around table to table as much as I could, and did ask some questions about were they in attendance yesterday at the event at Shields Arena, and of those that I talked to, they were, and the feedback was overall positive, I would say. You know, I just said, tell me what you think straight up, you know, realizing that they'll tell me whatever they're gonna tell me. But so from the guest speaker standpoint, and then also definitely people realized an overarching message about March and the mill levy vote, and consistency in messaging from those that took part on the stage. And there was a little bit of, what was the comment? Got a little partisan. That was kind of a little bit of a comment, but I think really what they meant was not partisan like from one political side to another, but just because they went on and we talked about it a little bit more then. I said, well, you know, what do you mean? And more in regard to, we know this vote is really important. We know that we've pretty much been kind of told, you know, we have a job to do type of a thing, like we all have a job to do. And I explained that I had served on that, the Vote Yes committee prior to being on the board. And I said, you know, I know that I didn't do everything that I could do. And I think a little bit of, you know, obviously for some people, it's coming out of our comfort zones, them coming out of their comfort zones. And really, I said, it's all about us doing what we feel we can do. You know, we're not all going to be playing the same role, but spreading that message. But there definitely was an understanding that when push comes to shove, that this needs to happen. So at least from the people that I talked to. So I thought that that task was well achieved yesterday. Thank you, Dr. Schatz. And I have a Native American commission or a committee picnic that is this Saturday. So that's one of my new assignments. And that's at Oak Grove from noon to 4. I'm sure anyone is able to attend. And they have a meeting coming up on September 1st, too. That's their first meeting at City Hall. And then I've been in conversation just a little bit with Robin in regard to the Early Childhood Coalition Board, but I need to visit with her to get up to speed on a variety of things there. And I know we need to set up a meeting for GAC, too. But that is my report.
Great, thank you. Jennifer?
So I just have 2 dates for you. Communications has set up their first meeting time, which is we're going to stay with the second Monday, actually, of the month at noon. So you all are welcome to come, Dinah. And then health insurance is going to be meeting the end of September, the 27th. So I'll have more for you after that meeting.
Great, thank you. John?
Thank you. I was able to visit all of my liaison schools, not last week, the week before, McKinley, Longfellow, and Woodrow Wilson, Agassiz. In particular, I got a tour of the whole of everything that's going on in Agassiz right now. And I knew this before, but it's always so great to be in that building. Unfortunately, there weren't any students yet, but that is just a jewel of our city. I love it. Not to take anything away from any of our other schools, but there's so much more going on there that I think many people in our community realize. It's really wonderful. Of course, the all-staff event yesterday, the feedback that I got from that, from teachers and administration and everybody, it was fantastic. They love, I know there's some comments from different speakers that, oh, you all, would rather be getting your rooms ready. I heard none of that from the people that I talked to. They love that first event. They love everybody being together. For similar reasons to me that I loved it as well. We're one Fargo Public School District. It's great to see the numbers that we have. I think a lot of times you get in your little building, you get in your little group, and you forget about how big and how diverse our district is. And I think it's a great reminder, in addition to all of the great messaging that we had yesterday. Informally, I was at Hawthorne this afternoon with my kids for the Meet the Teacher one-on-one meetings. I think that's new. Is that something new we're doing, or has that been done before?
It's not something across the board, but it is something new to Clara Barton Hawthorne.
Okay. It's really cool. The teachers were meeting, unlike I think what's going on tonight through all the schools where you get to bring your school supplies in, see your classroom, find your desk, all that thing. The teachers are meeting one-on-one with all of the students at a scheduled time to kind of get to know them, and it was just wonderful seeing the Hawthorne teachers and the Claire Barton teachers meeting with those kids, and it's just the ideal of what we're hoping happens in our schools, where they see that kid as that individual kid and say hi, introducing themselves, or, oh, I've seen you in the halls before, how was your summer, how's your siblings doing? I saw some of my kids' former teachers, and they all remembered my kids and asked how they were doing and if they had the same interests, and Just fantastic, really good. Also, while I was there, I got cornered, of course, by the PTA to remind us that the Claire Barton Hawthorne Ice Cream Social is coming up on the 15th, and we're all invited, and they're hoping to see us, and they're looking forward to seeing us. Thank you.
Great, thank you, John. Brandy?
I'm actually in the process of setting up my meetings for South and Lewis and Clark principals. I wanted to give them time to kind of get in their building and get structured before we decided to set up time. So, and I also went to the luncheon today for North High, and it was pretty cool that they do that. And he said they've been doing it for 25 years, so that was pretty neat. And found some retirees that actually are in my neighbor. I didn't know she taught there, so it was pretty fun. And also the feedback with the speakers as well, or that speaker that from our deal with the teachers, and it's just everybody was so excited to see their old friends, I think was the biggest thing, because you could just see them like waiting for people to come in. So I think that was it was really great to be a part of that. That's all I have.
Nice, thank you. Christy?
I was a participant in the foundation meeting. I got to go to my first meeting there, and I will be setting up some appointments with my schools coming up. I wanted to also wait, and I'm going to go be visiting when Dr. Schatz goes to visit. And then feedback, some teacher friends that I know and saw yesterday, same thing, great feedback, and we've got to get this, their quote was, "We've got to get this thing done and give us the material so we can get the news out." So it was very, very positive.
Great, thank you. David?
I think by my recollection that this was my 41st back to school. And I've got to compliment everybody that was involved in planning it. He was by far the best speaker I've ever heard at an opening session. I think what was so enlightening was to find somebody who's basically a convert from the dark side. And what I would really like to get my hands on was that trifold he had of everything that's been added to educators' plates since, what did he go back to the 70s or something?
It's on his website as a PDF. You
Okay.
can download it, yeah.
I have not looked yet, but thank you.
You bet. Thank you. Dinah?
Okay, sorry, Linda, I'm not going to be short because I have a whole list here. After the last meeting, I went to an ESPB retreat in Bismarck. We had two main focuses. One
Could you
was-
just say what that ESPB?
Oh, I'm
just-
sorry, that's right, sorry, not everybody knows. Education Standards and Practices Board. So it's a governor-appointed position, and it's not necessarily a liaison that I've received directly through this board, but I am a school board member on a board of 10, which consists of 2 school board members, 4 teachers from the public system, 1 from the private system, 2 superintendents, and 1 higher ed representative. And we're responsible for teacher licensure and teacher professional development and a few other things. But the biggest thing you hear about is licensure. And we've just hired a new executive director. I don't normally report, or not certainly every meeting, but you'll understand why in a second. I'm telling you about this. But we hired a new director, so we had a retreat, and we had 2 days. 1 day focused on the actual operation of the board itself and how we want to go forward and the interaction we're going to have with our executive director and some of our expectations of how she gets out into the community and promotes ESPB. But the second day was the ESSA, the new education law. For anyone who is not familiar, and certainly the newbies are probably not as familiar, one of the major changes from the old No Child Left Behind to the new law is the requirement of highly qualified for teachers. And so if you're the licensing board, you have to figure out the laws that are now in the North Dakota laws, how those now can be modified or changed in light of the new law. And there's, of course, like the laws like this. And anyway, so we had quite a bit of education and then a lot of really good discussion. But the basic piece that the ESPB is moving forward with, and we are now going out into our various constituencies across the state to discuss some of the recommendations that we are going to make and get some feedback from, you know, the superintendents and teachers and so on. But our major goal is to streamline the licensure process for new and existing teachers, but still maintain the quality. And for those, I could talk about it for a long time, but I'm just trying to highlight a few pieces. So one of the things that's not necessarily as prevalent in Fargo, but in some of the rural areas, is teachers who have the skills to teach specific subjects, shortages of, say, science or math or some of the CTE stuff, or special ed and things of that sort. And so what we're trying to do is make it easier for qualified people to be licensed to service across the state, of course, but so that some of these rural areas can work with people who have credentials, but not in what the old law provided. So that's a really interesting discussion. I think in the next couple of months you'll hear a lot more about it, and I'll certainly update you with what ESPB is going to propose in terms of the legislature. I went to the Eagles open house. That was the public open house, and that was fun. I was most interested in seeing how the old part of the school is meshed with the new part of the school, and I was really pleased. I think they great job, Brock and Jim and all those folks. And Tanya was very excited about the new year. And there were a lot of people there that weren't necessarily people with their kids, too. So that was kind of fun to see. We also had a Board of Health meeting. John Strand is our newest member of Board of Health, so I'll be seeing him on a continued regular basis. Two important points from that. The tobacco measure that I mentioned several months ago did pass and is going to be on the November ballot. So I urge you to support that, and I will bring in future some more concrete materials for you to understand the details of that again. The other thing is that the FDA has changed the way they want environmental districts to license food establishments. That's grocery stores, restaurants, school kitchens. Anything else. And as a result, the Board of Health Environmental Department proposed to the board at our meeting a new license structure, which will affect FPS in terms of our license fees for our kitchens, both in our schools and in our district kitchen. And so I put Cindy, who's our new food service person, in touch with Grant, who's the head of the division at Fargo Cass Public Health, to work together so that she has an understanding of when and what the changes are going to be. And our board approved them, but the city commission has yet to finalize the approval in their budget. But I don't see any reason why these fee structure won't be changed, and it will result in some higher fees for FPS as well as everybody else in the market. So that's just something to look for. I just wanted to go on record to say what a fabulous job the communications division did of this insert in the paper. I read it cover to cover, and one of the pieces I liked, and I told Anne Marie about this yesterday, was the history of the building, because I was one of the ones who was adamant about keeping the name Eagles, and I really loved the way that was written, and it made me even continually happy that we kept the name Eagles. Also, the feedback I got yesterday was great. I visited in the last 2 days all of my schools, Lincoln, Carl, Ben, and Ed Clapp, and introduced myself to the staff. And I have to say that Ed Clapp, the teacher of the year, is at Ed Clapp. And so I was able to personally tell her what a great speech she had. And she engaged me, and so I had a little more personal conversation with that group of teachers. And there really was positive feedback and support for what happened yesterday and what their role is in the bigger picture. So that's it. Thank you. Sorry to be so long.
Great, thank you, Dinah. And you were not shot down on this? You're not always shut down?
Oh, no, yeah.
Not always.
No, I came back from vacation. It was, had brought this back to the forefront, so yeah.
Great, well, thank you, and again, thanks to everyone, and we'll convey, I've conveyed thanks to Anne Marie for the great job that she and Brock and everybody did. It really was terrific. So tonight, Anne Marie is at back to school night, so I want to thank Diane Garski for being here and filling in. I hope I didn't make it too confusing. My apologies again. The only thing I want to call attention to on my report is you'll see September 7th is our governance committee meeting, and that was moved. It was normally scheduled for the 6th, but at our last meeting, we determined that our standing meeting time going forward will be the 4th Tuesday of every month. So you see September has 2 governance committee meetings because that September 27th is the first of the standing time. So just wanted to make sure we got that. And if there are no other issues, we will meet again on September 13th. Thank you. We're adjourned.